That's fine. That's fine. Tim is Matt is sorting beans back there. No, not Matt. I'm thinking about work a lot. Anyway. Welcome everybody to our third listening session of the Charter School Committee, which I am the chairperson of the ad hoc committee. I do want to, before we get started, just mention something that a church member had said to me, and I wanted to clarify something. I am the member at large for this year. That is why I've been assigned to this committee. I didn't volunteer. I didn't say, I don't have any skin in the game. I don't have kids of the age of this school. I just want to be clear that I am doing this as in my capacity as a church council member and not because of any sort of particular desire to do so. I've been happy to do so. It's part of it, but basically Daniel Webster very kindly led the PPP committee last time, and so it was my turn. So just to clarify that, because if one person thinks that, then probably more than one person thinks that.
And you are Beth?
My name is Beth Heinrichs, and I'm sorry I don't have my name tag. I left it in my other pants. Anyway, so I have a presentation to give you of everything that we know so far, and we'll go through that, and then the second half will be questions and answers. I also have, I don't want to hand them out yet because I don't want people reading ahead. But I have the FAQ that I've prepared, which has been sent out through email, but I have a hard copy for folks to take a look at, and hopefully it answers some, if not all, questions. So, considering constellation, listening session 3. If I could go to the next slide. Oh, not that fast. A brief timeline. So this just kind of gives some context to where we are at now with this process and this decision. In October 2021, the enlistment campaign begins. We have good, strong giving with more giving units than ever, but a pandemic economy and rising costs of insurance and other things means that we are behind. In November 2022, the initial campaign ends with a $65,000 deficit. The only line items that could be cut would be staff salaries. So there weren't any like big, we tightened the belts, but there wasn't enough belt tightening. Or enough, I don't know what that means. The metaphor has gotten away from me with the belt tightening. Okay, beginning of Advent, Maureen and Bromley put out a supplemental ask that raises $18,000. So there's a budget deficit now of $47,000. In the first week of December, 2 things happen. Publix approaches us about renting 35 of our parking spaces for their staff members. And Constellation approaches us with an interest in leasing the school for leasing the space for their school. So, next.
Beth, may I ask a question? Was that prior slide, was it November 2021?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yes, 22 is
November 2021. It helps in the slide if you know what year you're in.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you. It's important. We haven't gotten to November 22 yet. Publix is interested in 35 parking spots. Council accepts that that Lisa can sign a contract on our behalf, and I think it's announced at the upcoming congregational meeting. Also in December, I think I jumped ahead. Anyway, the office is approached by the Constellation School, and we have several meetings for fire and code and just seeing if the space is even remotely suitable. Council exec, which I'm a member as council member at large, meets the following week to discuss whether we could even be open to considering welcoming the school. CE recommends that the church council hold a special meeting to establish by vote an ad hoc committee. The church council meets and establishes the committee. At the January 30th congregational meeting, council exec member, and me, shares the information we have about the school and their initial proposal. I announced that the committee's process will include multiple listening sessions and opportunities for congregational feedback. On February 24th and March 6th, the first 2 listening sessions happened. They were both on Zoom. This was our first in-person one. On March 9th, a survey went out, which I hope many of you have gotten and been able to answer about this issue. Next. What about a vote? On March 16th, Church Council approved a call for a special congregational meeting to vote to approve or not the collaborative agreement with the school. And the congregational meeting will be April 10th at 12:30. The exact motion is motion to call a special congregational meeting on April 10th at 12:30 for the congregation's authorization by 2/3 vote approval of those voting for the moderator to sign the collaborative agreement as presented with the school after consultation with council exec and board of business, additional input from the congregation, and a vote of approval by 2/3 of the voting charter school committee members for its execution. And then Don, in his role as moderator, will sign the lease if approved. So I think it's important to point out that it will be a 2/3, not a simple majority. Next. Who is in the committee? So me, you've just met. Family Promise, using the space, it was important to include Dawn Beachy. Board of Children, Youth and Families, Taylor Stein. Board of Business, Bill Hopping. Congregational Representative with Charter School Experience, that's a really long title. That's Jenny Hill. She runs Resilience Charter School here in town. And then some important staff members, Lisa Goldstein, Carrie Trosper. And then we have 2 non-voting members, Ministerial Liaison, Talia Raymond, and non-voting moderator, Don Smith Lopez. So that's the committee. Next. Primary benefits. So some pros. The education wing is used once a week for church services, and I'm talking about the classrooms. So it feels like, for some on the committee, that it feels like a good use of that space to welcome a school. Cost sharing of needed improvements. One of the things that the school would need to do in terms of safety is improve our fencing around the playground. That's something that has long been desired by childcare staff. The fences are both in poor repair and lacking in privacy. So if the lease was approved, we would split the costs of improving that fence. Bring children and families onto campus and position UCG as a welcoming community for young families, which can have some benefits in terms of membership. Obviously, being a public school, there will be no overt recruitment. That would be against some important principles that we hold. But informally, people may feel a connection. And I would like to point out there are some folks who are current church members who are involved in this school initiative, though none of them are on the committee for reasons of conflict of interest. Next. A few more benefits. The Financial Sustainability Committee, which has just started meeting, this gives them some time to sort of, because it is not a permanent lease. They're looking for a 3 to 5 year opportunity as they explore getting their own building. Gives that group some time to consider options, sort of buys us some time financially. Public charter schools in Alachua County do often serve underserved populations, which feels in fitting with our mission. By working with outside organizations, we can see the first-hand benefits and pitfalls of particular types of new ministries for the future. Next. Primary objections. So a lot of this is based on questions that we ourselves as a committee have asked, and also feedback from the survey. Concerns about space inaccessible for church programs such as the children's Sunday school, family promise, food for kids, parking trouble for morning prayer. So these are real concerns that we hope to address. Parking lot and building wear and tear. That's part of the lease negotiation, setting a cap on what acceptable wear and tear is and what the school would have to cover if it went beyond that point. Ambivalence or opposition to charter schools. I feel like that's something harder to address. Like, it's a question that can't be, people feel passionately about this issue, and there are, in my mind, good and bad things about charter schools, but my opinion on it isn't really that important. Affects relationships with other rental groups. That is a concern, and we have talked to the school about clearing space for evening rentals. It does basically have an effect on daytime rentals. It would not have an effect on inside church group, such as Food for Kids. They will still have access to this space. Absolutely. Concerns about unforeseen consequences. That's the committee's job, is to try as best as we can, without the powers of future forecasting, of figuring out all the pitfalls that could happen and talking to the school ahead of time about, okay, what do we do if the toilets stop working? What do we do, and working through all these issues. Timeline is too fast. I agree on this one. It is too fast. It is, I just personally, it's been all the work that we've done. I would have liked to have done it in a slower way. But the school is eager to recruit for the fall, so the timeline is sort of what we have to work with. And we've, I think, been as diligent and careful as we can within that timeline. Next. I think we went ahead once. Other considerations. Other churches are looking to outside sources of revenue. The idea that we can sustain entirely based on pledging units. We've done parking for football for as long as I've been here. So it's not new to us or unique to this church that we're exploring these options. There have been a lot of years of deferred maintenance on the building, and that was one of the reasons why the PPP funds went to improving much needed improvements in our wing, children's wing. And one of the benefits of having the school would be a partner to help share costs going forward. Next. It's a limited agreement if it would pass, and that means that we can get out of it if it doesn't work well. Though, as a committee, our job is to make sure that we have thought through all the ways that it could not work well and mitigated those things. The school leadership of Constellation and our committee have worked very hard, and I can say, honestly, we have worked very hard to think of all the different logistical things and work with the school about all of the ways that they can be good sharers of the space. And the school itself is very committed to sharing the space in a way that respects that it is our home and that our programs come first. Next. That might be it. Okay. Let's start with questions and answers while Tanya passes out.
You
Yes?
can repeat the question in your answer so that
Okay. Yes.
What can you tell us about the Constellation School, particularly in terms of the diversity of its proposed population?
Yes. The question was about the diversity of Constellation School. So they are like any public school, public charter school, they are required to not turn away students. They are required to advertise throughout the area. I know they are doing outreach events at Farmers Market, at Cotton Club, at different places that will provide a diverse student body. We are hoping that the school can come and meet with us, with any interested folks on the 27th to talk about that specifically, as well as their overall philosophy of education and mission. But that is a really good question and something we are definitely.
And beyond diversity, what is their focus?
There are some resources in the FAQ about Waldorf. I do not consider myself an expert by any means. It's a Waldorf public school, which is very different. There are many Waldorf private schools, and there is a website for the public Waldorf initiative because there is ways in which Waldorf has to be sort of fit into a public school model because public schools have different criteria for, so they will need to have the standardized testing and all the other things that a public school has. So charter schools in this county, in Florida, can't just, there are accountability standards.
Question over here.
Hi, Kitty.
I'm concerned that, for example, there are new signs out over there about gays and all of that. I'm concerned that this will, if we have in this school for young children, that we're going to have to obey that. And that's the first thing that hit my brain.
Okay, what?
That no, we don't say gay. Okay? Yeah.
But I don't see that sign is related to the school.
It's related to who we are and what we feel and all of that. It's a very fundamental issue. I just referred to it because I saw it when I came in.
We asked this question.
Yeah, thanks, Kitty. The question was about the recent legislation of the Don't Say Gay laws and how they might affect our school's ability to be, our church's ability to be proudly pro-gay and trans and advertise ourselves as such. And we have told the school these signs don't come down. And so they are aware of that. And I don't have a crystal clear answer on it because the legislation may very well be tied up in legal as it should. But we have made them aware and will continue to talk about it. But we have told them that our church signs are important and need to stay up.
Our courtyard is not part of the lease agreement. And so
True.
this is church property, not school property. And we feel pretty confident that they could not tell us what to do on the church property, which is.
Correct.
Well, but, all the other facilities that they use, church philosophy has to come first, I believe. So whatever we put up there, or the children's groups, whatever related to gay, it has to stay there,
Yes.
right? I think that's, the sign, I can see that, is on our property, but the shared property, that still has to reflect our philosophy.
We agree, yeah.
Jeff?
I agree also. I didn't want to come because I didn't want to be negative, but I don't support charter schools, and the main reason is because I think the state is using it as a division between our minority communities and white population. I think that the state ignores and is adverse to a lot. Look at what happened with our school board recently, and the fact that the governor stepped in actually and replaced the school board member.
Yes. Yeah.
I think charter schools are just not equitable as a concept and as a state's division of resources.
So to paraphrase the question for our home viewers, Jeff brought up some good points about the charter schools and their use of the state to increase inequity. I think we're looking very specifically at this charter school. That's how I see my committee role, is to see what this charter school will do in terms of diversity. On a personal note, I do agree that charter schools have been used by the state, though there are many excellent charter schools in our community that are individually run and serve needs, but they've been used cynically by the state to defund the public schools. In my opinion, that is mine. Yes?
I know we probably need to get back to this issue, but my question is there a physical group of parents, teachers, and children that is actually providing the education as homeschoolers or anything? Is this still a school on paper, or is it actually happening in fact in some way prior to getting their charter?
No, the school, I mean, the question was, I believe, did the school exist before? Is that is the
Sort of like that. Does
So
the
this
school
is a
actually
new-
exist?
This is a new school. It has a board. The board meets publicly per sunshine laws. They have a website which lists their board members. So you can, Constellation Charter School. But no, it has not existed as a school, and it won't until,
Or a homeschooling group or any?
no, it is not based on homeschooling. No.
Could I address that just briefly?
Yes.
There is a Waldorf school currently that serves pre-K and
Yep.
kindergarten children. It's a private school, so it's not free. There was a Waldorf school here for decades, and one of the teachers from there is the director of Morning Meadow, which is the pre-K and kindergarten. And many of the parents there are very supportive of being able to send their kids to a public charter school that follows the Waldorf tradition and philosophy. And the charter schools in Alachua County are very different from charter schools in other counties. They are actually homegrown, grassroots schools that support a specific need. And they're not corporate charter schools as in many of the southern counties, like Dade County, Broward County, have these big corporations that run charter schools. This is a different species here in Alachua County. I don't know about other counties. But that is the general population they hope to draw from and then add to that. There are a lot of parents whose kids have gone through the Waldorf system who would be very happy to have their children in a Waldorf philosophy-based public school. And the public charters, as you said, cannot refuse any child entry.
No.
They have to take non-English speaking kids. They have to,
Yeah.
whoever applies on a space available basis.
Yeah, the only one question was about ESC students, so exceptional student education. They are required, like any public school, to accept ESC students. The only caveat is that most charter schools don't have the facilities to have standalone ESC classrooms. So for students whose IEP, individual education plan, posits that they need to be in what's called a free self-contained special education classroom could not be served by any of the charter schools in the county. So but any child with an with an IEP that allows for 80% or more participation in a general education setting can and must be accepted by the school. I have a kid in ESC, and I know these rules, so thanks. Pam?
This may have, I came in a little late, and this may have already been addressed, but I'm looking at the rent that we.
No, we haven't gotten there yet.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, that's what.
I've owned quite a few rentals. Carol and I did it for a bunch of years. And one of the things we learned, and you probably do know this, but if a church's income is, let's say, $30,000 a year, we found that realistically, we as the owners can really only expect about 40% of that to be our income. About 60% of it goes to the stuff you have to do to keep it nice, to keep it,
Yeah.
to pay for everything there is. So possibly here, you wouldn't have quite that much overhead because some of it you already have.
Yes, and it is worth noting that they would be responsible for utilities as well.
Well, yeah, we were all, oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
I was responsible for the
Yeah.
But
Okay.
anyway, I just want to put that in, that you really cannot expect, if their income, if our income as rent is 25,000, let's say, or 30,000, you absolutely cannot count most of, a lot of that as income. You've got to count that as the cost of doing that job, of having them here. So take that into consideration with saying, okay, we're going to get 30,000. That means we as a church, I don't think we can expect anything over 20,000.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we have this graduated approach by number of students, which is kind of unusual for a commercial rental venture, but not that unusual for a school venture. With the idea that, first of all, it's the way the schools are funded. They're funded by student, by the state. But it also reflects, in my mind, the fact that if you have a school of 75, there's potential for more wear and tear than if you have a school of 50. So we will make more money with a school of 75 than a school of 50. So that's one way to sort of address that, but your experience is helpful to consider, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
And the repairs are written into the lease.
And yes, and repairs above a certain amount will also be part of the lease agreement. Thanks.
Connie.
Connie, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm wondering, in what way is recruitment going to address the most needy or the kids most in need of this approach to education?
That's a really good question, Connie. Thank you. The question was, how will recruitment reach out to kids who are most in need? I think one of the benefits of a Waldorf school for a public, I mean, not benefits of, well, that it's publicly funded is that it's a tuition-free school. So one of the initiatives of the public Waldorf education, and I can't speak for this group because I'm not a part of this group, but is to make Waldorf education available to students who can't pay tuition. Because as you can imagine, there was a school previously with many of the same folks, not all of them, but some of them, called Heart Pine, and that was a private school. And so I think one of the issues they ran into was being able to run on the school with, based on, and what do you pay? Tuition, thank you. Word salad up here sometimes. It's just like, so yeah. But I do think, and when they come to talk to us, and that's something that we want to address, because I do think it's important to not just make it available to people who already were willing to pay the Heart Pine tuition.
As you said,
What?
they're actively recruiting at places like the Cotton Club.
Well,
where-
that may or may not address
That's fair.
really needy.
That's
folks.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Thanks, Connie. Oh, gosh. I'm going to go, Riza.
Hi, I was going to address that issue as well, and because it's a charter school, they don't provide any transportation to students.
That is correct.
Which means it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's my concern, that it won't be an integrated school, which I think is important to this church.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Chad.
First off, I want to say thank you for speaking and leading this session. It's a lot of questions coming at you. I do have two questions, and I have never been part of the execution of some sort of commercial lease, and I'm curious about. I read all the information is really helpful, but in terms of is there any sort of I know when you rent a house or something like that, there's always some sort of a deposit that is
Mhm.
required. Is that something that's also worked into the contract?
Yeah, the contract is not, so the school will present us with their first draft of the contract for us to negotiate from. We gave them a copy of, or kindly Jenny provided her lease with her landlord for resilience, which has a lot of good language specific to a charter school. So we gave them that as their template, and then they will get us within days their first draft, and then we'll. But yeah, there is going to be a deposit. I was looking at that lease with Resilience recently to see it. In their case, it was like a month's rent, typical of many deposits. And there's also language about liability and things that we'll use. But we will also have Bill Hoppy is a lawyer, and he's on the committee. And that's also what we'll present. We'll present this lease agreement to be voted yes or no, but people at the congregational meeting will have not just like, do we want to do this or not, but do we want to do this specific lease that will be made available ahead of time for folks to peruse. So thank you for that point. And do you have a second question?
Yes, sorry. I will, this will be my last one. But,
That's fine.
Additionally, like, is the school itself considering other alternatives, or is it one of those things where they are looking at UCG as the only option, and we'll have to pivot really quickly and rush?
They do not have any other options to find a kind of move-in ready space for a school in Gainesville, they spent many months looking and were not successful. So the fact that we're the only option is not a reason to hurry or to not consider. It's just a reality. Hi. Thanks, Glenn.
Hi, Beth. I'm Glenn Acom.
Hi, Glenn. I've emailed back and forth with you.
Yeah. I've got concerns mostly about not the physical space, but the outdoors. I really think that the parking lot's going to suffer, and hopefully you'll have built-in paving. The concern I've got also is parking on bare earth at some point with a lot of cars could end up being quite a dilemma. So having some money for either, I don't know if I want to pave, but at least deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I strongly feel that there's going to need to be a staging area where the kids are dropped off and picked up.
Yes.
It needs to be of an adequate size for a collection of a couple of kids and some faculty. And I don't see anywhere to put it except in space, the area of space 81 and maybe even 82, and then have to have a walkway to the sidewalk so that there can be movement without having to go onto the exit aisle. And for safety reasons also, the evening, I don't see how they can adequately know the sequence of kids so that they have to bring a large group to stage and be ready for whoever car comes to pick them up. And that's a sizable space that we don't have right now,
Yeah.
and it really should be paid.
Okay.
The other concern I've got is I don't know how we keep them all out of the courtyard, and we have things that we probably should upgrade, particularly brick walkways that are uneven, and for that matter, even gutters and drainage issues, other than just stringing off their ability. They're probably going to use it, and I don't see how we can stop it.
Okay.
Those are my two areas of concern.
Thank you. I appreciate those both. So the plan at this point in terms of pickup and drop-off, why is it car talk? Pickup and drop-off. The Russian chauffeurs pick up and drop off. Sorry. Every time I say it. Is to have first two things, though I think your concerns are very valid and we need to work through them. So I don't think this completely answers it, but it's a start, is to have, first of all, the school will only have 12 parking spaces for their staff. We have Public's parking of 35 if, we ever get that contract back. So there is, we've said many times, and they understand that we cannot offer parent parking for a parent. So the drop-off situation could not be parents, like some schools, parents park and bring their kids in. That's not possible. So the alternative is a loop through the parking lot. Now, as we get closer, the safety folks have been, and especially as they go through the process with the city, we'll need to look at that. But that is the current idea. In terms of impact to us, they will have a 15-minute set of groups so that kids won't all start at the same time. The older kids will start first, and their 4th and 5th grade is likely to be under-enrolled just because people don't you typically sign a kid up for a new school for 1 year. The 1st through 3rd are going to be probably at full capacity, so 18 students per. So the smaller group would go first and the larger group would go second, with the idea of allowing some spacing of the traffic. Now, I do know they'll have an after-school program, so some kids might stay for the after-school. So I think the drop-off or pickup, yes, pickup will be different because it won't be all at once. So that might alleviate some of that. So like a lot of public schools, they'll offer aftercare till 5:30. So I hope that, but the overall ideas about the parking lot, I think we need to.
Yeah, the courtyard?
Courtyard, so we need to figure out where they're going to stage, because the courtyard is not part of the lease. It was initially something they were interested in. We took it off because they needed to gate it. So the drop-off and pickup would be, I imagine something where they would be staged indoors, and then some schools do walkie-talkies to that's what, for example, when my son was at Foster, they did. They maybe gather in this space if it's available or in that classroom.
Regarding pickup and drop-off, we live 2 blocks from B'nai Israel, which has a similar parking situation, and they have a very nice loop that the cars can go through and drop off at the door.
Yeah.
Where the kids go right in. I just don't see how a remote drop-off can work at all.
So the school will need to have a proper amount of staff and volunteers to escort the students. And that is something that they know. That the safety procedures from the county will demand that they have a certain amount of staff and volunteers to safely escort the kids. So, but it is a big issue to work through. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Yeah, I am also very concerned about the parking because if you start figuring out how many cars can stack in there and going around, it's just not that many. Even when we park now, just the congregation, there seems to always be, there's somebody parking a truck in there, and another car comes out, juts out. I've seen these 2 Sundays in a row. You can just hardly get by.
Yeah.
Those two. So your parking's pretty full. Then you've got these stacks. Then what are they going to do? Offload onto the road here? Everybody's gone by Littlewood before when we're all sitting there, and they're backing up to come in. Plus, if you're having the kids walk from that parking lot to here, is that what we're talking about? Because kids can be very unpredictable.
Yeah, that's why there will need.
And that's fast. They can get out in that road.
Yeah.
Boom. And I know you've got Bill Hoppy, who's I'm sure an excellent lawyer on the committee, but I think if somebody sues the school, they're going for everybody. I think the liability issues are enormous, frankly, if they're walking back and forth on this tiny little sidewalk.
Yeah.
So I've taken kids on field trips from what used to be J.J. Finley Parker, and we've walked all the way to, the donut shop.
Yeah.
To get fresh donuts with kindergarten kids, and it has not been a problem. What I'm picturing, and this is just an idea, what I'm picturing is parents in that loop The kid gets out of the car, there's a staff member waiting. When that staff member has 8 kids, they walk those kids. There's another staff member waiting for the next 8 kids. Or something similar to that scenario is what I'm picturing.
Well, I understand that, but when you're taking a field trip, it's 1 out of what? How many days in the school year? You're multiplying the odds tremendously by doing it every morning, every afternoon.
That routine.
Well, you're asking a lot of little kids.
I think 1 adult and 6, 8 kids is not a big deal. We're not talking about a school of 500 children here.
I recognize that, but I also think that the odds are not in your favor.
And I sincerely disagree, but we can disagree still for the future.
That's the beauty of it. Okay, I haven't had a chance to.
Hi, I'm
Carol,
I
thank
was wondering if the committee has talked to any other churches or religious institutions that have hosted a similar school, just to like brainstorm with them, okay, what are the issues that you came up with, what were the difficulties?
Yeah, I know that Andy has talked to, Highlands Presbyterian rented to what was Heartpine. I do think it's important to note that it's a different school than this current, but some of the folks are the same. So it's kind of like hard to make an exact comparison. But Andy has talked to him and shared some of their concerns. So yeah, I mean, there's space sharing that needs to be really thought through carefully with our children's programs. For example, Carrie walked our head of pre-K through 5 education, met with Sylvia Paluzzi, who is on the president of the board, about how space sharing would work. So it's definitely, but in terms of other churches, that's the only one that I know of. That church, the building exists, but the congregation doesn't exist anymore. So in terms of beyond the minister who was there, there's not really any way to contact. But that's a really good question. Thanks. Hi, Jeff.
Since this is very much about church income, what do you think about the temporary nature of the income that results?
The temporary, I mean, if it was 1 year, I wouldn't even look at it personally, because I don't think it's worth 3 to 5. I do think it buys us some time to look at more at other options. I don't know exactly if this should be it's not going to be a long-term solution, just like the Publix parking won't be a long-term solution. So it's something to explore and consider, but it's not something that is going to be, the final.
Beth, when we're ready to vote, I really think we ought to see the anticipated income.
Yeah.
The anticipated and thoughtful, comprehensive expenses, what would be covered by the school, and what may not be, and we have to subtract that from the income. I'm very worried that our desire to meet the needs of the school may end up having unintended consequences to our thoughts of the profitability, if you will.
Yeah, no.
And I think that information needs to be shared, even if it's ranges of costs or
Yeah.
something, so that the congregation will know.
Thank you. That's a very good point, and I will bring that to the committee.
And there is something in here about cost sharing if any improvements are needed or repairs.
Yeah. Hi, Kitty.
I'd just like to ask one more, I guess, a good question, but
There's no
why
sup-
does Publix need parking places? Which Publix are you talking about?
The one on 13th, it's for their employees.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's a long walk, yeah.
I know.
Yeah. That's the situation with parking apparently in this town, that they're willing to pay top dollar for a long schlep,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The new little parking, the new little public parking, so it's like 4 blocks.
The one on 13th?
Worrying about that,
She walks everywhere.
But I just want, I just didn't know that Publix needed parking spaces.
It's for their employees. So they do not have adequate parking for staff and employees at that small location on 13th. And I mean, that's why, in all honesty, we know that this is probably a temporary lease because there's a lot of buildings going up. There's a lot of garages going up. I'm sure they'll find something closer. But yeah. So it may just be a year. I'm not privy to that conversation. Are there any more questions? Oh,
Just one more. And first of all, thank you for all the hard work you've done.
thank you.
My other question was actually, a friend was asking this question. She's a public school teacher. She said, I want to know, would this church, would our church be dividing, not necessarily, how do I put this? I'm not going to put it as well as her, but basically not endorsing this school. So regardless of what we think of Waldorf, it is a particular type of school.
Yes.
So would we be taking the position that we are an outside entity and all we are to them is a place to be? We're not necessarily endorsing everything they do or everything they do with children in the way they do it.
That's a really good concern. I do think we see our missions as complementary. We see them as a school that nurtures, that believes in nurturing the whole child and things that we can definitely get on board of. The specifics of Waldorf, no, we're not a Waldorf church if that is a thing. But I think it's important. I was explaining to some folks who were interested in the school, I'm like, this isn't our school. This is a public charter that is using our space. However, I do think we would not consider a school, for example, that discriminated against, and a public school can't do that. But if it was a private school that was like, anti-gay, or, there's obvious ways in which we're looking at this as a reflection on us, but not an endorsement, if that makes sense. That's how I see it anyway.
And it's also, just to push that point a little further, a reflection on us that we're willing to endorse a charter school.
Yes.
Versus not having, versus endorsing, versus being concerned about supporting our public schools and charter schools siphoning off money from them. So that's a concern too, I think, among members. There's a number of elementary or school teachers. I mean, I work for UF, that's a public institution. So that to me is an implied endorsement of the system, which I think you can make a pretty good argument does deduct money from public school systems. So, I know there's thorny issues, but I do think those things because those are things that other people had to bring to my attention. Because my first impulse was, yeah, great idea, Waldorf, love the school, yeah, let's go, right? And then people started saying, well, what about this, what about that? And I started thinking about it more in depth. And these are some of the issues I started thinking about.
Yeah, and I think it is a complicated issue. I do think Jean brought some points about when people think, there's two sort of, in my mind, issues with charter schools. One is the corporate charters that are, for-profit, very, that I think can be quite problematic, and that's not what we're dealing with here. There is the larger philosophical issue, though, of charter schools and public money and what, large public schools having a certain amount of overhead that a charter, because it's, each student, their money goes with them. And so I understand the funding model and how it can be problematic. I also understand the way that the state has used, I think we'll discuss this further in the congregation. Thank you. Anything else before we? Well, thank you so much for taking the time to attend. I really appreciate the questions. They were challenging but thoughtful, and that's always what I expect from UCG. So thank you very much. Thank you.